So here's the deal. I just really love sandwiches. And today we're making a French dip sandwich, or at least my take on a French dip sandwich, so let's jump right into it. We're making a French dip, so we kind of need a dip to dip our sandwich in. How many dips did we just dip? I don't know. Should we start a little dip counter? Maybe we'll start saying dip a whole bunch. We're gonna cut up a bunch of onions. Great time to practice your onion cutting skills, or just cut them up however you want. Sweet, onions cut up. Great, let's start cooking those down. They shrink a lot. It's kind of like spinach. You know, you throw a bunch of spinach in a pan and then there's almost no spinach when it's done cooking. This is kind of the same. We're gonna add that with a bunch of salt, cook it down, add a bunch of garlic. I just like to use the pre-peeled stuff if I'm gonna cook it down, and I use probably a head's worth of garlic. You're gonna cook that until it's nice and super dark, which is going to add a lot of depth of flavor, and then we're gonna deglaze the pan with red wine. And in order to get all the flavor in there, you're gonna scrape the bottom of the pan nice and heavily to get all of that burnt stuff off the bottom of the pan and work that into the sauce. And now it's time for some thyme. All the puns intended, but we're just gonna take the leaves off of the stem. The stem doesn't really taste very good, but we're just gonna go a little bit crazy with it. I probably put like 15 stems worth of thyme into the sauce, and that's gonna make it taste great. Once you've timed up that sauce, we're gonna throw in a bunch of beef stock. I didn't feel like making any, so we just bought some from the store. And we're just gonna throw all that in a blender. You could probably use a hand blender, but it's not gonna get those thyme leaves nice and fine, but I just threw it in my Vitamix, blended it on high until it was super smooth, and then we're gonna put it back into the pot. So a lot of French dips just use roast beef, and if you want to go to the store and buy some roast beef, you should probably just do that. I'm trying to save money, don't have a ton of it right now, so instead of buying roast beef, I decided to go for a tougher, cheaper cut of meat, and we're just gonna braise it and maximize that flavor. And here's the meat in question. I just got a chuck roast. This is kind of the end of the shoulder, so it might look a little bit different than some other chuck roasts you see, but I specifically got this one because I thought it would slice up nicely. It still had a decent amount of fat, and it was super cheap. I'm just gonna dunk it straight into the sauce, flip it around so everyone gets nice and coated, and then we're gonna throw that into a 350-degree oven for about 3 hours. So after about an hour, I threw the lid on the pot, cooked the second 2 hours with the lid on the pot, and while that's in the oven, you got a lot of time to do whatever you want. Go live your life. Or if you're stuck in the kitchen anyway, you may as well make a couple other things. Let's start with a little sauce for our sandwich. I'm starting with a whole head of garlic. Just gonna cut off this little rooty bit, throw it into some foil with some olive oil, make sure that's nice and coated, wrap it up like a little package, and throw it into that same oven for about 45 minutes. At this point, the garlic will be nice and roasty and soft. You're just gonna squeeze it out. It was really hot, so I used the foil to protect my hands, and then just took my knife and mashed it up into a nice little paste. And now we'll just throw a little sauce together. Of course, I'm using Duke's, my mayo of choice, and we'll slice up some chives nice and thin. I didn't use all of those, but I threw some in there. Now we got some fresh horseradish. You gotta take the skin off if you're using fresh, then throw it on the microplane, grate it up nice and fine. You could also buy some prepared horseradish from the grocery store if you can't find fresh. That's going in the mayo with the garlic, lemon zest, lemon juice, some salt and pepper to taste, and then you're just gonna mix all that together until you get a nice little sauce. If you wanna add more or less of anything, feel free, but this is the sauce that I made. Super tasty sauce. Check! Now let's caramelize some onions. Let me just say that caramelizing onions is one of those things that's like super tedious and annoying. You gotta sit there and stir them around a whole bunch, but the end result is so good. It's worth it. So you're gonna throw some oil in the pan. This is like 2 onions worth of onions. Go ahead and season that with a bunch of salt. Don't be too shy with the salt, or it'll help release the moisture and get these to caramelize correctly. And we're gonna cook this on a pretty low temperature for a long time and stir very often. Feel free to use the mouth stir if you're feeling like a little no hands action. This whole thing probably took me 30 to 45 minutes to get them nice and perfectly caramelized, at which point we can just throw them in a little container and save them for later. Speaking of later, it's been about 3 hours and it's time to take the meat out of the oven. See, I told you the lid's on it. Oh, no it's not. Gotcha hat. Anyway, I'm actually gonna come back in just a second and put the lid back on it, but we're gonna let this cool all the way down so that it stays nice and sliceable. So like I said, if you don't wanna do this, just go buy some roast beef. No skin off my back, but if you want the tastiest and cheapest sandwich possible, then you'll do this. And if you do decide to do it this way, basically the technique that we're going for here is that we're gonna braise it until it's soft but not falling apart, nice and tender. Then we're gonna cool it all the way down in the fridge overnight so that the next day it's solid, holds its shape, and we can make really thin slices, which is gonna make for a great sandwich. Welcome to tomorrow, where I'm always wearing the same hoodie even though it's a Texas summer outside. Anyway, meat is nice and solid. We got the bread knife, which is really easy for carving, and we're just gonna carve up this meat into thin slices, as thin as you can get it, and then we're going to throw it back into that dip. Remember, I was supposed to be saying dip. Let's get that counter up. Dip, 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 dip. I mean, really, jus would probably be a better word to use, but it doesn't really matter. It's just gonna act as a swimming pool for our meat. We're gonna throw it in there, bring it up maybe a low, medium heat until it's nice and bubbly and hot. For the sandwich, I was feeling a little sourdough, threw on the sauce, toasted in butter with some provolone and those caramelized onions, load up that meat nice and fat, throw the top on it, cut it in half, and you got yourself a really beautiful looking sandwich. Then you're just gonna grab something to hold your sauce, a vessel if you will, load that up, you got a beautiful sandwich, take a big old bite, decide that that was super tasty, but I wasn't gonna eat all of that meat by myself, so I took some over to my best friend's house, and he's just like, why are you trying to make this on sourdough? You should make it on a hoagie, it'll be a better sandwich. So I decided, okay, I'll go get you some hoagies, and now we're gonna make another sandwich on a hoagie instead of sourdough. Not much new going on here. I did toast up the bread for just a second before throwing on the sauce, and then threw in some cheese to act as a little barrier from the sauces, the meat, the onions, more cheese. Threw it under the broiler for just a couple minutes to melt said cheese, then we cut it in half, and voila, you have another beautiful French dip sandwich. Yep. Cheers. I think I like this form factor better. Either way, really good. Hope you make it. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Like the video, it actually helps. Drop a comment, that also helps. Either way, see you in the next video. Thanks for tuning in.